So look, I really wanted to make a video today on what happened with this Bulls season, what went wrong, what do they need to do to fix it, but honestly, making a video like that before the season concludes, especially with the playoffs still remaining, I thought a video such as that would be very premature. I really need to see how this team does in the playoffs before coming up with conclusions on the season and what moves need to be made to fix their issues. So in today's video, I'm actually going to be talking about why these two final games of the season are actually more important than you might think as we head into the postseason. And I would love to hear from you guys and your thoughts on it as well. So what's going on, everyone? You were listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I think we can all agree that the end of the season for the Bulls, more especially after the All-Star break, has been kind of a disaster. Like, the Bulls went from being the #1 seed in the East and people were talking about them being contenders to now going 6-14 in their last 20 games, a massive drop-off. Yes, injuries have been part of that drop-off, but still falling like that in the final games of the season is pretty bad. And even when the Bulls got some of their injured players back, they still struggled to string some wins together. And there's a deeper issue at hand when it comes to effort and communication on the court that has fallen off since the beginning of the season. Zach Lavine said it in his postgame interview after that blowout loss against the Celtics, "We look like a totally different team right now, and it's upsetting." He then went on to say, "Offensively and defensively, we are disconnected right now. A team that started clicking so early at the beginning of the season for a revamped roster, that chemistry and flow of their offense has gone by the wayside. You can see it on the court. The guys often look lost at times, not really knowing where they're supposed to be on both ends of the floor. They're looking frustrated. The energy and fun that they were having at the beginning of the season has gone away. And above all, the team as a whole have lost their confidence and swagger that they played with at the beginning of the season." Now, Billy Donovan had an interesting quote after that loss against the Celtics. He said, "We're not as bad as we've played, but you know what? We probably weren't as good as what we were when we went on that 9-game winning streak. The truth is somewhere in the middle." That is a direct quote from Billy Donovan, which is kind of an odd thing to say. And he's made comments like this before in the past, implying that the Bulls were really outperforming and not as good as maybe they were on paper, which doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence in your players. Like, even if you do think that and that were true and you felt that way as a coach, probably not something you would want to say publicly to the media, because it's not going to sit well with your players that even though they were playing well, your coach didn't think you were as good as the perception of the team was because of their record. But whatever, either way, all of that is to say, there is something to be said about finishing off these last two games strong. Even though the games might not really mean much in the standings, considering the Bulls are most likely going to finish with the 6th seed at this point, but even to finish the last two games strong, to gain some semblance of confidence, some semblance of cohesion, and fixing that disconnection on offense and defense that Lavine called out is important before you begin your first playoff series. Now, I should add, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bulls decide to rest some of their players, specifically Lavine, DeRozan, and Vucevic, and likely even Caruso since he's still suffering from a back injury. And really, like, yes, these games are important, but I also get the idea of resting these guys, especially Zach, because he isn't 100%. I do think it makes sense to play the guys if they are okay to play, though, because from a rest perspective, they're going to be able to rest the whole week off between the final game of the season and until the start of the playoffs, which won't be until next Saturday. That's a good amount of rest time. That's the benefit of finishing in the top 6 and not having to play in the play-in. So I know some people are going to come at me in the comments and say, these two last games, they don't really mean anything, and the Bulls should just try and rest all their players as much as they can. It's not worth risking getting injured and giving them as much rest as possible before the playoffs. Like, yes, I get that. And again, I wouldn't be mad if some of the guys did get some rest. But at the same time, this team is bleeding out. And they're bleeding out right now at the most important time going into the playoffs. And you need a boost of some kind to stop that bleeding and get the confidence back before going into the most competitive event in basketball, being the NBA playoffs. The other reason these two last games are important is because these are somewhat easier games, and I say somewhat easier because they're still both playoff or at least play-in bound teams, starting tonight against the Hornets and then on Sunday against the Timberwolves. But these are teams that are not like the Bucks or the Celtics or the Heat that the Bulls have gone against more recently. So winning games against competition like this is going to be easier to do. And winning games, even if it is against inferior competition, does improve the overall morale of the team and their confidence to hopefully rally together and light a fire under them going into the playoffs, rather than losing out the season going 0-4 and also losing against lesser teams like the Hornets and the Timberwolves. Now, the Timberwolves are actually playing some pretty good basketball right now, and this game is probably going to be tough a tough game to win for the Bulls regardless, especially since it's on the road. Like, the Wolves looked like they were going to be missing the playoffs yet again this season, but have now been right on that cusp of the 7th seed, and believe it or not, have a better record than the Bulls do. And the Bulls made good work of them when they came to Chicago. DeRozan went off in that game, but overall, with the way that Karl-Anthony Towns has been playing more recently, and of course with how Vucevic has been playing more recently, I do have a hard time seeing the Bulls winning this one. But for the game against the Hornets, a team that is 500. Also, they're facing the Bulls coming off of a back-to-back as they played the Magic last night. This is a game you have to win, especially when the Hornets don't match up well against the Bulls, historically speaking anyway. Vucevic has had big games against the Hornets because they don't have a legitimate center. They did get Montrezl Harrell after the trade deadline, but you'd have to think that this is still a matchup that Vucevic can take advantage of. The other thing for the Hornets is that they may rest some of their players for the play-in because they're pretty locked into that 10 seed. And they have to win their play-in game against either the Nets or the Hawks in order to stay alive and face the loser of the 7-8 matchup. So the Bulls might even get the benefit of guys like LaMelo Ball or Terry Rozier sitting out for this game. The Timberwolves, it's a bit different because at the time of this recording anyway, they still have a shot at the 6th seed by surpassing the Nuggets. And if that is still the case by Sunday, they're going to be playing their hardest to avoid the play-in. If it's already established by Sunday, they've locked in the 7th seed, then yeah, you could see them resting some of their players because the play-in game is going to be more important than their final game of the season if it has no impact on their seeding. So look, for the Bulls, this is an opportunity before the playoffs to try and fix and mend their issues on both ends of the floor, working on moving the offense with heavy ball movement and game plans for when DeRozan gets doubled to work on how to better defend the pick and roll that they've struggled with all season, to fix the disjointed communication on offense and defense, to actually come out and give a damn like they want to win the game, build that confidence, build that momentum going into the postseason strong, and hopefully at least make a 7-game playoff series competitive, regardless of who they play, to at least have some pride in bringing the Bulls back to the playoffs for the first time in 5 years and at least putting up a fight rather than getting swept off the court. That's my hope anyway, but I want to know what you guys think. Do you think these last 2 games are critical for the Bulls at this point? Or is this a seasonal wash and they should just rest up the players while they can and address their issues in the offseason? Let me know in the comments, and as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.